Hello, everybody, and welcome to the WSFT Network. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Mad Mouth, and tonight we usher in a new broadcast called Inside the Pigskin. So this is an all-football show, and this show will cover NFL, college football, all aspects of pro football, the United States Football League, XFL, Canadian Football League, betting, high school, fantasy. We'll be doing some remote broadcasts. So you want to talk about an all-inclusive football show? We get it. And what we are not going to be talking about tonight will be the Tom Brady retirement, Brian Flores coaching carousel, Jim Harbaugh, or the Super Bowl. And the reason why is I know there are very hot topics right now, and I want to go out there and bring on college football expansion. But before I do that, I want to welcome Eric Katz to the big show. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
Why don't you give everybody a little bit of an overview of who you work with?
Well, I currently am a writer for Belly Up Sports, writing primarily about the Wisconsin Badgers football team.
Very good. Well, Eric's going to be a contributor throughout our network. I know he likes to talk about baseball, college football, pro football, you name it. So we'll have ourselves a guy who's very, very versatile. I don't have to give an introduction to Steve Balestrieri, do I?
No, I'm on here all the time. I'm like gum on your shoe. You can't get rid of me.
No, I can't and won't, so it doesn't make a lick of difference anyway. So it is what it is. Steve is our KG veteran. We know that Eric is a young pup on the crew, but it doesn't mean that he doesn't know anything. Okay, unlike Sergeant Schultz for Hogan's Heroes, this guy knows plenty. Okay, and Mel Farr is my running back, who I know to give the rock to when we need to. Welcome back, Mel. You played the game. Now you get to talk about it full time.
Thank you. Great to be back.
All right. Well, like I said before, tonight's topic is going to be college football expansion. And this has been on my mind for a long time, which is why we're leading off with it. Right now, the current college football playoff format is at 4 teams. I say bring it to 12. I don't even like 8. And I'm going to make a confession out there right now, folks. Okay. This year's college football playoff did not interest me whatsoever. It reminded me of the SEC championship game round 2 at Indianapolis. So I did not watch the Georgia-Alabama game. I went to bed early. So, but that said, okay, you want to call this a reason for me to say, change it. So with that said, Eric, why don't you give us your thoughts about the Final Four, which should be anything but the Final Four. And before you do that, I do want to point out the fact that as of 2020, there are 10 conferences of the 130 schools in the FBS. So to tell me you can only come up with 4 schools out of that group, okay, I know we had a couple first timers of the Michigan Wolverines and the Cincinnati Bearcats, but that Final Four was way too low. Take it away, Eric.
Well, it's almost like, I mean, this year was great. It's been getting different teams in there, yes, but generally for a while it was the ACC or the SEC. I mean, generally you might get one or two teams from there, but this year was a bit of an odd year, especially with, we didn't anticipate Cincinnati being the team that they were this year. But in general, I feel like there needs to be expanded, because every year I feel like it's just going to be the SEC versus the SEC, because the SEC, like if you make it to the championship game, you know, you're almost an at-large bid. But my thing is they got to expand it to 8, because you'd be able to get all the bowl games in there. It's like the Rose Bowl, which was at one point everybody's dream to play in growing up. It's almost become a second-rate bowl game without it being in the playoff. We saw it this year with players at Ohio State deciding to opt out because they weren't in the college football playoff, and then fans even becoming disinterested because it was the college football playoff. I mean, the Rose Bowl is the granddaddy of them all. I mean, how can you not be interested in that? You expand it to 8 teams. That way you get a Big 12 team in there, you get some Big 10 in there, you get some SEC in there, you get some ACC in there. And then you also have an opportunity to obviously the SEC is going to get in regardless, but all the major conferences would have an opportunity to compete, kind of like how they do it now with March Madness, which I feel like now in basketball, compared to basketball, everybody gets in there.
Well, I mean, let's face it, I like the bowl games, so do the NFL scouts. That's why I really watch a lot of them. It's another opportunity for these guys to get film. And I do want to point out that the FCS has a playoff, you know, the football championship series, and they have a really good setup. I enjoy watching those, and don't kid yourself, those players at those schools are really, really, really good. So Steve, with that said, Eric says 8 teams. How many teams do you think they should have?
I think it should go to 12. And I'll give you my reasons why. And, you already made my argument. You felt like that you were watching a repeat of the SEC championship game. Well, get rid of the conference championship games. And then you bring the top 12 teams in, you could spread those out over some of these bowl games, and that's your college playoff. That way the players aren't going through extra football games. And honestly, I mean, was there a doubt in anybody's mind, like go back to the SEC championship game, that Alabama and Georgia both belonged, in the tournament? So was that necessary for them to play twice? I don't think so. And the same thing, I mean, Michigan has to beat up, was it Iowa? And I can't even remember now, but if you, I believe if you get rid of conference championship games, which basically all they are is a money grab, right? I mean, that's where the conferences get their, TV money. If you get rid of those, you can expand your conference championship, your college football play up to 12 teams. You could spread those out over bowl games. And I think you have a much better product, and I think it would generate a lot more interest.
What do you think, Mel? What's the right amount, 8 or 12?
I'm kind of a college football purist, and I can't really say I enjoy watching the playoffs, but I can't really say that I'm a fan of the playoffs. I think it really hurts the bowl, that whole bowl season. I really think it devalues the bowl games, and you see a lot of players, as Eric was talking, drop out of bowl games because they want to get ready for the draft or whatever the case may be, and possibly, afraid of getting hurt, which, injuries are a part of the game. But I know, from my playing days, that bowl games were huge. I mean, they were big. And obviously, we had an opportunity to play in the biggest role, in the granddaddy, in the Rose Bowl. And that's what it wasn't about trying to make it to a playoff. It wasn't about trying to be the national champion. It was about winning the Pac-10 at that particular time. That's what it was about. It's about winning the Pac-10, getting an opportunity to play in the Rose Bowl, represent your conference in the Rose Bowl. That's what our goal was. And, now, you hear these coaches talking, all they're talking about is making the playoffs now. So, forget about winning the SEC or winning the Big Ten. It's not even about that. It's about getting to the playoffs. And I think, it just kind of, again, like I'm a purist. I mean, I win your conference and everything else will take care of itself. Back then, they had polls, and the polls would vote, and they would determine who was the champion. Well, they didn't like that because they didn't feel you're getting the true champion. So then they came up with the BCS, and then they didn't like the BCS. So now you have what we have now. Now, you say you didn't want to see Alabama and Georgia play again, but they were the two best teams in the country without question, bar none. Those were the two best teams in the country based on their resume. And so that's what we end up with. Now, Steve, say you made the conference championship games a part of the playoffs. Then if you had Alabama and Georgia playing one another, then one of those teams doesn't move on, right? So then that's not, and I know that's not what you said, Steve. I understand you saying just get rid of them totally. So I don't, I kind of, I like it the way it is. I don't think there would have been a different outcome if you would have had 12 teams. I don't think it was going to be a different outcome. You kind of look at it like we just had when we had the wild card weekend. You just had some really lopsided games in the wild card weekend. Then all of a sudden in the divisional round and in the championship round, we had some really good football games. And I think that if you expanded it, you're going to have some really lopsided games that are not going to be fun to watch. And all this is the only reason why they're talking about expansion is because of money. It's all about money. It's all about greed. What about, they always talk about player safety and we want to do what's right for the players. These players right now, if you played in that championship game, they're playing 15 games. That's almost an NFL schedule. and they don't, I'd be really interested to hear what the players want to do. I'd really be interested in here because we don't hear what the players want to do. All we hear about is what the athletic department wants to do or the presidents of the universities want to do. And we know what they want to do.
Money.
They're trying to get money. That's all they want to do. What do the players really want to do? And get them involved in this conversation. And, if they want to expand to 8 or 12, expand to 8 or 12. But I mean, I think you really got to look at the bowl games, because some of these bowl games had like no people in the stands. Oh. And I know the television, ESPN doesn't care about that because, they're getting eyeballs, they're selling eyeballs. So they're selling advertising, but the schools have to be concerned because I'm sure I would think that they're getting some of that revenue that is generated by the attendance. And, the cities that these bowl games are held in, I mean, I'm sure they'd like some of that tourist revenue as well. If nobody's in the stands, nobody's watching the game, nobody's physically going to the game, they need to really look at some of these bowl games, whether there's too many. I think in some cases there's too many. If you have a team that's 6-6 getting into a bowl game, they probably don't really deserve to go to a bowl game. And then some of these bowl games, you'll have the 8th best team from the SEC playing against the 2nd best team from some other, the AAC or something like that. I mean, who wants to watch that game?
Well, I agree. I mean, let's face it, what I would like to see is some sort of March Madness, where even if it gets to 12, and then and 12 would be where I would max that out anyway. So I wouldn't go any more than that. But right now, what you have is you have pretty much 40 bowl games. And to me, those are participation trophies when you win them. And again, the only reason I even like the bowl games is because it gives NFL scouts another opportunity during non-conference play to see other players. That's the
bowl game. Well, the bowl games are, they're good because they give the coaches and players another, so many practices. So that gets, if you have graduating seniors, it gives you an opportunity to put some of these guys that may not have received a lot of practice time, gives them an opportunity to get some additional practice time before the spring, because the whole thing is about trust. I mean, the coach is going to play if they trust you. If they don't trust you, they're not going to play. The only way they're going to trust you is they got to see you, and they got to see you do it. So the more opportunities these young kids get an opportunity to get out there and practice and play and show what they can do in front of their coaches, then the more opportunities they're going to have in the fall to get out there and play.
Well, but more importantly, though, I agree with you there that they will have an opportunity to play in the fall. And remember, for a lot of these smaller schools where the players are actually playing the bowl games and not getting out of them, that's an opportunity to get in front of scouts. So, it's not like you have a major Power 5 school where a guy's deciding to get out because I know my stock is as high as it's going to go. That's a different animal. So I see where you're coming from. But, no, we're looking at Bahamas Bowl. What are you going to get 5,000 people to show up?
I think that's the game I was watching one time. I mean, there's like nobody over there. I mean, what are you doing?
So don't get me wrong. If I had a bowl game I'd put on my bucket list, I'd like to go to the Bahamas Bowl. Forget about the football. Let's just hang out at the beach. And maybe the football would be the aftermath. But meanwhile, you have other bowl games, which are premium bowl games that could fall into, you're only talking, 12 teams, maybe 6 bowl games that have some real teeth to them. And then you stay with the current system. You don't have to deviate it.
I mean, I think all bowl games are good. Unfortunately, my senior year, everybody thought we were going to go to the Rose Bowl. They thought we were going to beat SC. We ended up losing to them. So the only bowl game that was available for us at that particular time was the Aloha Bowl. Right. Well, that was a Christmas Day Bowl versus a New Year's Day Bowl. I mean, that's what you want to try to do. You want to try to get a New Year's Day Bowl. But it's a Christmas Day Bowl. But I mean, it was good because we got to go to Hawaii. That was great. Right. We played against Florida, who was a good team. That's when Emmitt Smith was a freshman, a true freshman, and he had, he did everything that obviously we know what Emmitt Smith went on to do. But it was a great experience. It's not just about the game; it's about the experience. A lot of these kids ain't ever been nowhere. You got to understand. A lot of these kids, I was fortunate. I had been to some places, but a lot of people haven't been anywhere. I remember the first time we played at the University of Colorado, and guys looked outside and like, "What is that?" They're talking about the snowfall. And I said, "Man, they'd never seen snow before." I said, "Man, I'd be upset if that was on my car." That's how these California kids talk.
But I think when you really look at 12 teams, you're only looking at 6 games. That's it. Okay, so obviously I'm not a math major, but 6 times 2
Well,
equals.
you're talking about 3 additional games because,
That's all. I'm just talking about, yeah, I mean, right now, to me, I'm only looking at.
right now they're playing 15. So that's an NFL schedule. That's
Well,
more.
well,
That's
no,
Canadian football schedule. That's 18.
Well, if we're going to get to 18, we got Mr. Katz here that knows about the USFL too, but we don't even get into that. But I'm talking about if you had a 12-team playoff, okay, and initially 12 teams, you have 6 times 2, you got 6 extra games. What is it, 6 games, right?
Yeah.
It's only 6 games, but it's 6 games. So whoever wins is going to play additional 3 games.
Right. Well, that's true. Okay, so I see where the math is. But and then you prioritize your bowls. Again, that's what makes it such a stimulating discussion, okay? Because we're talking about 12 teams with an opportunity to get in and the winner goes on. And then the other bowl games are not adversely affected. That's why I'm having a lot of fun with this topic, because right now, anything is, in my opinion, is better than the current system.
So now you're talking about probably reducing the number of games that they play during the regular season then.
Well, sure. That gets back to what Steve said, okay? Well, if you're really worried about injuries, then who needs a conference championship games other than the fact that it's a money grab? So there you go. You're making my point, Mel and Steve, obviously.
That's the 13th game. So now, they play 12 game schedules now, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what they play. So that's, you have to cut it back to like 11. I think when I was playing, we played 11. I think we played 11 games back then. Yeah, it was 11. So, I mean, you got to cut it back. Well, you can't, these kids ain't getting paid. I mean, it's involuntary servitude. I mean, that's just, you just can't make these kind of decisions unilaterally without getting the students involved, the student athletes involved, who everybody says they're so concerned about.
Mel, the thing about it is on that end though, is you have to remember though that these guys are getting name, image, and likeness deals now where they can actually draw a little money for their play on the field. It's not like what it used to with the athletic department gets all the money and then the athletes are just left to go to class and fend. But the thing about it though is
name, image, and likeness was never meant to be the way that it is right now. What Ed O'Banion sued the NCAA for was not for this. It was actually for the universities to pay the students, because you look at the athletic department budgets, you look at some of the money that these coaches are making, and you're going to tell me there's not enough money to trickle down to the players? You can find a way to pay these coaches money. Brian Kelly, the money, all the money that he's getting. Jimbo Fisher, the money that he gets. Nick Saban, the money that he's getting. Man, hell, they, the Lincoln Riley. I mean, they paid USC, bought both of his houses in Norman, Oklahoma, and paid $100,000 more or whatever over market value for these houses, and gave him a house out there in Southern California, which I'm certain is not cheap, and they give him full access to the private plane, to the private jet, to do whatever he wants to do. Plus, they're paying him a salary. Now, you're telling me there's not enough money to pay players? That name, image, and likeness, that's not what Ed O'Banion sued the NCAA for. That's not. And this name, image, and likeness thing is just a free-for-all. It's a wild, wild west out there. It's just crazy.
Well, now with the reason why you'd want to expand it though, besides having the extra film, I understand to your point, Steve, with the conference championships, because I was at the Big Ten championship this past year, and obviously the tourist money is big. Like every restaurant and bar you went to, you had fans there. There was obviously stuff during the day, stuff happening in the stadium, and obviously you go and experience the game. Which, to be truthful, Iowa did not have a chance that game. The only reason they backdoored their way in because Wisconsin couldn't get it done against Minnesota, a place they hadn't lost it in since 2003. But I know for a fact that Iowa wouldn't have been a playoff team. They just weren't. I mean, they were 10-2, yes, but they weren't really that dominant. We saw what Purdue did to them. Wisconsin, they came into Camp Randall and Wisconsin ran them over. But we all know that offensively, they were offensively inept. Just, their defense was, very good this past season. But the reason why you'd want to expand it though is there's always that possibility of an upset. We saw what happened to Michigan State at Purdue, and we also saw what happened with Iowa against Purdue when Iowa lost to them at Kinnick. I mean, there's always that possibility. I mean, there's no guarantee. Yeah, this year is wild card games, like you were saying, for example, were a bit of blowout. I get it, but doesn't mean the same thing won't happen next year. We've seen wild card teams go to the Super Bowl. For example, the 05 Pittsburgh Steelers, at the time it was 6 teams in the playoffs. They got the last seed at 11-5 because the NFC was strong that year. They go ahead and they win their wild card game. They beat Peyton Manning, and they beat Denver in Denver, a very hard place to play. And they go ahead and beat the Seahawks, who had Sean Alexander that year, and they go ahead and win. A last seeded team can do it. We've seen it. We've seen Cinderella runs happen. I'm sure we all remember when Jim Valbueno's North Carolina State Wolfpack, they upset the Twin Towers in that year's NCAA finals. But it can happen. I mean,
were the playoff games, the 2 semifinals, were those games competitive? No.
Actually, Cincinnati, though, to their credit, though, I mean, had they done a little more on offense, they actually did keep up with. They actually got to hang out with Alabama a little bit up until the end, and then Michigan. Well, we knew Georgia had one of the best defenses that year. We knew that it was their year. Unfortunately, in the SEC championship, they just weren't getting the stops that they were going, and the offense was kind of stalling at that point. But the fact of the matter is that team, it was going to be either Georgia or Alabama this season. You could just tell. I mean, Bryce Young looks like the real
Alabama.
deal.
Alabama to me wasn't that impressive this year. They weren't the normal scary Alabama. They weren't that impressive to me. But I'm just saying, if you expanded to 12 games, does that mean you're going to get more exciting games, or are you just going to have more games? Just for the sake of having more games.
I don't think you want to expand to 12. That's why I go back to the point with 8, because I believe that, there are some, I know in some years with the top 10, there are plenty of worthy teams who should have been in the playoff. For example, not this past year, but the year prior, Texas A&M's only loss was to Alabama, which Alabama beats a lot of teams. We've seen it happen over and over again with Nick Saban. But, the fact of the matter,
A&M should have been in there.
I believe they should have.
How many games did they lose this year? Oh,
you're not
talking about this year. Oh, okay.
No, I was talking about last year, where their only loss, they were 11-1. Their only loss was to Alabama.
Got you.
And that was I thought they should have been in because they lost to Alabama. I mean, Alabama had not a lot of people beat Alabama. I mean, if you beat Alabama, you have a chance to win a national championship. Just ask Coach Ed Orgeron's LSU team.
Let me ask you, if Alabama plays Cincinnati 10 times, how many times does Alabama win?
I think they win all 10 times because to be truthful, Cincinnati got in is because they part of the reason was they beat Notre Dame. That was a big reason.
That's the main reason. And then they ran the table the rest of the way. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they beat Notre Dame, that's what got to know. Now they had a great year last year too. Mm-hmm. And so they just kind of continued that momentum that they had going on from last year. But obviously, if they don't beat Notre Dame, they're not in the conversation.
Right. The Notre Dame win was impressive because they beat them pretty good.
But Notre Dame's not a good football team. I mean, they won. I mean, they ended up with a good record, but they're not a great football team.
They're just, they're not college football great. We've seen what happens to them in the playoffs and also even in the BCS when they faced Alabama.
Same thing that happened to Michigan.
The lights get a little too bright for these teams. And then, we see what happens. We saw Michigan get curb stomped by Georgia after they won the Big Ten championship and after also Michigan finally beating Ohio State.
Well, let me point out one thing here that is interesting. Whether this thing goes to 8 or 12, okay, if it does go to at least 8, no undefeated team can go out there and complain that they didn't even make it into a playoff. So that eliminates any of that. How many times have we heard the likes of a Central Florida complain, we didn't get in, okay? And then they self-proclaim themselves national championships, which to me is about as clowny, okay, as a clown that they have in Jacksonville for Trent Baalke, okay? That was a clown show if I've ever seen there when it comes to Central Florida proclaiming themselves national championships because we were undefeated, big deal. So we eliminate any of these pseudo champions, if I may add, okay? So you eliminate the undefeated there. So whether you go 8 or 12, it doesn't make any difference. And again, this whole show, mind you folks, is about college football expansion. I'm not smart enough, not getting paid enough to tell you whether it's 8 or 12. That's why you got the guys in ties that'll never figure it out anyways, attempting to figure it out in the first place. So, but whether you have 8 or you have 12, you eliminate the undefeated. And of course, you do want to be able to have those marginal teams that can't complain that there weren't enough people in there to get their shot at the title.
Well, Central Florida is is like they're playing in the American Conference, the former Big East. They're essentially in a comp, with Scott Frost. They were essentially what the University of Miami was for the longest time when they were in the Big East, where they would practically just curb stomp everybody on their way to a BCS bowl game, because Miami was just the superior team of the time, which obviously they're not anymore.
It was Miami and Virginia Tech, wasn't it? Weren't they beating up everybody? Wasn't Florida State in the Big East too, and they came over to the ACC?
Yeah, Florida State was. I mean, that was the big rivalry. It would determine who would go to a BCS bowl at the time, which was either Miami or Florida State. This was before conference championships, and then it was also those were just the two teams in the conference. Obviously, Bobby Bowden was in his heyday at the time.
I mean, the Big East was a basketball school,
right? And it still is.
Well, yeah, now it's all basketball, all Catholic school now. But I think they have Connecticut's in there now too. They allow Connecticut to play there.
Yeah, but the Big East did have a period where they did football. Then obviously they went back to basketball. But I see the point is when you have these marginal conferences trying to get into the I don't want to say the little big dance here because it'll never get very big anyways. I know, Steve, you're absorbing every bit there. Are you chomping at the bit to go ahead and watch this chess match between Mel Farr Jr. and Eric Katz while we both get to be?
I think they're both bringing up great points. I mean, I was just looking at it from the standpoint, like, if you're going to have a legitimate playoff, I think you need to expand the teams, be it 8 or 12. And I think Mel's right. You have to cut some of the regular season games off. But I know a lot of these teams, some of the big name teams like Alabama, for instance, they schedule like one of these small schools that they usually beat 73-0, like Savannah State or something like that, for these smaller schools to get some TV time.
Get some money. They get some money.
Yeah, they get money. They get those guaranteed.
That's right.
Days.
But do we really need to see, Bryce Young throw 6 touchdowns against Savannah State? No.
It's a glorified scrimmage, Steve. Come on. You pay the small. I ought to know. I mean, Florida Atlantic University,
but
Schnellenberger made a living going out there getting waxed all the time. The only reason Howard Schnellenberger isn't in a Football Hall of Fame, college football, is because, number one, his record wasn't above 600 to begin with. But why? Because he's building programs from scratch, right, to begin with. And then he's taking those big, lofty paydays, and these teams are having glorified scrimmages. I know we could do a totally different show on that.
Well, you remember, though, Michigan got beat by one AA team.
Well, but let me tell you something about that. You bring that one up. I saw that one coming. I'll never forget. I'm glad you brought that up, okay? Appalachian State. It was the first game I covered at Florida Atlantic against Middle Tennessee State over at Lockhart Stadium. And I had another guy who was a good friend of mine that was a prognosticator. And when he asked me about what I thought of the App State Michigan game, I said, his name was Mark. I said, I have a feeling that the Wolverines were in for a tough battle because this is one of the best teams in that division. And what do you think happened? The Michigan lost. And I looked at him, he said, how did you know that? Because I do my research. I'm a journalist, okay? Don't forget it. I am a journalist, okay?
That was before App State became because part of the reason was, I mean, that was I believe that was the post Lloyd Carr year, where it was the first year, I believe, Rich Rodriguez.
No, I think the year that App State beat Michigan, okay, Lloyd Carr was the head coach, is what he was. Okay, Eric, just so you know.
They started 0-2 that year.
Well, whatever, okay, but Lloyd Carr was a head coach at that time. Michigan ended up paying Appalachian State $500,000. I've done my homework on this one, and I've talked about it a lot. And that $500,000 was worth a lot of TV money. And Michigan ended up beating Florida in the bowl game, but they were licking their chops the rest of the year. How did Appalachian State beat us? They ended up rescheduling them again for another year and beat them because they couldn't handle the thought of being 0-1 to App State. So, Eric, I realize you're very knowledgeable in a lot of areas, but you're talking about a guy who's Michigan born and bred, who's been around the country a little bit and follows. I'm wearing a USF hat, folks, because it is my alma mater. But deep down inside, I bleed maize and blue, and I have a lot of people that work there. So I don't want to
Yeah,
get totally.
I knew. I was right though. It was like the latter Lloyd Carr year, the latter Lloyd
Well,
Carr.
the latter Lloyd Carr years, yeah. I mean, but Lloyd Carr was the head coach at the time.
Losing to App State, we'll get that seat hot.
Well, Lloyd Carr. Well, I mean, that it was his latter years, okay. But the reality of the situation is, those guaranteed games can bite you. How many other ones? Michigan was the first one that lost, but don't you think that those guaranteed games were given? Okay, later on down the road after Michigan got the biggest wake-up call on the planet. So
It nearly happened again though, except it wasn't a 1A school. Michigan nearly lost to Army first game of the year back in 2019. It nearly happened.
Well, I hear you. I mean, these things can happen. You can find prospects from any school if you want. I don't care whether you talk about Jackson State, whether you can.
That's why they play the games, right?
Yeah,
that's why they play the games, because you never know. You never know what's going on with it. In the head of an 18 to a 22-year-old. He could have failed a test. His girlfriend could have broke up with him. Could have caught his girlfriend cheating. You never know. There's a lot of things going on with 18-year-olds.
Oh, that's it. You can find talent anywhere you want. The whole idea is, are you going to get noticed at a bigger school and all that? David and Goliath. But the reality of the situation is even if we talk about the college football playoff expansion, I'm a firm believer. I don't care what level you're at. Any team can beat any team on any given day. We've seen it time and time again, whether it's special teams, defense, offense not performing well. Why do you think the NFL tournament is so great? Because, if you were to go back to what you were saying, Mel, how many times that these teams are going to face each other time and time again, who would win the majority, but it doesn't make any difference on that one given day, Saturday.
The NFL tournament is a little bit different.
No, but the point is anybody can beat anybody.
Absolutely. I mean, the year I went to the playoffs, we were a wild card team, and it was tough. We
made it to the NFC Championship too.
Yeah. We went. We had to. The last game of the season, we had to travel out to New England and play them, and then we had to travel back out for the wild card game against Philly. Came back home. And then went back out to New York to play the Giants and won in overtime, and came back home and just went up the coast to San Francisco and got mollywopped.
That Jerry Rice, that Bill Walsh, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Roger Craig. I mean, but still, you beat Parcells. You beat Parcells though. That's hard to do. You beat Parcells.
Yes, we did.
Look at this guy. Well, like I said, I was. What can I tell you? We have one thing I love about our broadcast is, whether you're young, you're old, it don't make a lick of difference. At least I know one thing: we're going to all learn something from each other, and that's what it's all about. But when I want to talk about kicking off a brand new show like Inside the Pigskin, just so you know, Inside the Pigskin can be found on Spreaker.com and the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. It is important to realize that when we talk about these kind of things, that it's all wide open, and I enjoy when everybody has an opportunity to not only learn something but also express their opinions. I think that's what we accomplish, right, Steve?
Absolutely.
So when we put a button on this show here, Eric, good first act. Okay, so I'm going to go to final thoughts. Steve, give me your final thoughts about college football expansion.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would like to see it expanded, either 8 or 12 teams. I would do away with conference championship games and maybe 1 or 2 of the gimme games they schedule early in their regular seasons. Stick to their conference schedules and go from there. I mean, I would incorporate some of these playoff games into the bowl season and do it that way. But I just don't like the 4 teams. I don't. To me, it's too arbitrary who gets in, and like we've seen in the NFL playoffs, the way they're going, there's always a team that gets hot at the right time, and if a team makes it into the tournament, they might be able to go all the way. You never know.
All right, so Steve, final question: how many teams?
I'd like to see 12. I started off with that, so I'll stick with it.
Okay, Eric, go ahead.
I just think that, it's obvious who's going to get in. It's going to be the SEC, the Big Ten, and then the ACC if it's not having a bad year like this year. But I feel like, other conferences should have a chance to get in, like the Pac-12 or the Pac-12, obviously more from the ACC, also the Big 12 where offenses rule. But I just think that, we've seen it time and time again in the playoffs where a team will get hot, they'll do some unthinkable things that we don't think will happen, and then they win a championship. That can still happen. I mean, did it happen this year with in the NFL playoffs? No, but we've seen it happen before. Take the 07 Giants, for example, win all their road games and then go ahead and take down the then undefeated New England Patriots. It can happen. I just think that other teams deserve a chance to at least compete. I mean, you might catch the better team napping, thinking, oh, we're just going to roll them. We see it happen all the time during the regular season.
Okay, but Eric, you're saying 8 teams of the college football expansion. Is that correct?
Correct.
And give me one more piece of logic why it should be 8.
You would include all the big bowls. Like the Rose Bowl would no longer be treated like a second-rate bowl game. You get the Cotton Bowl in there, the Peach Bowl in there, all the big bowl games would be in there. And then obviously you can reshuffle them for the national championship, whatever you want to do. Kind of mix it up with have a mix of BCS as well as current playoff. I just think you'd be able to blend the two systems together, and also 8 teams. 8 teams is enough. There are plenty of teams behind, the 1 through 4 that were equally as worthy. Probably not so much this year, but in the past, 5 and 6 have been very, very strong.
Works for me. Mel, closing thoughts, college football expansion, how many teams?
I'm not really for it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I think, you look, I don't even think I watched the Rose Bowl this year because you had the Pac-12 champion going against the second best team out of the Big Ten. I mean, that to me, that's not what the Rose Bowl is about. The Rose Bowl is about the Pac-12 champion going against the Big Ten champion, and you want to see good on good. So I can't really, I enjoy it as a fan, watching the football games because I love watching football. I love watching college football. So I enjoy watching as a fan, but I can't really say that I'm all for expansion because the players get left out in this whole deal. The only ones that are going to be making money are the schools, and the players get left out.
And you know what, Mel? I respect your point of view. I really do. So what we have here, folks, okay, Steve believes in 12, Eric believes in 8, Mel doesn't believe in it at all. And I guess I'll give you my opinion here. I believe that you can take Steve Balestrieri and you can put us on a Xerox copy here because I believe that they should go 12 for every reason that Steve talked about. And that's just my opinion. Now, I will throw one little wrinkle before we wrap it up here, is bear in mind the SEC is going to be expanding by 2 teams, and Oklahoma and Texas join. So that'll be a very interesting dynamic to see how that plays out for another episode. Okay, but I'm just throwing that in there. So meanwhile, great first act by my crew here. So with that said, the way we usually do things is, Steve, let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Well, thanks. And as always, it's a pleasure to be on here with you. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at SteveB7SFG. I write for PatsFans.com. I do a podcast for them. And I also am a national security columnist for 1945.com.
Beautiful. All right, Eric.
You can find me on Twitter, Facebook, and just at Sports Team News. You'll be able to see me there. Also, feel free to go on bellyupsports.com. Take a look at my Wisconsin Badgers football content. Got a lot of great stuff there, and it should be another good year.
Mel?
All the different social media at Mel Farr Jr., Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, and find out what we have going on here in Atlanta and back in Detroit at melfarr.org.
And last but not least, me. Okay, I'm the owner, CEO, publisher, South Florida Tribune. You can find this broadcast on our YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune YouTube channel. Subscribe for free. Then you get all the videos that we have from all of our different shows out there. And we have lots of different ones. You can also find them on www.southfloridatribune.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Tribune South. So you're listening to our first broadcast of Inside the Pigskin. My name is Scott Morganroth. We hope you enjoy this edition, and we're going to have all kinds of great shows on this particular show. And I was just so glad that we were able to kick it off with three fine people such as Steve, Eric, and Mel. I enjoy the camaraderie with you guys, and looking forward to having you guys on a lot of different shows as we always have. Welcome to the team, Eric. We appreciate you kicking off this inaugural show for Inside the Pigskin.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Well, on behalf of Steve Balestrieri, Eric Katz, Mel Farr Jr., my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us on Inside the Pigskin. And until the next time, please be safe, everybody, and take COVID-19 seriously. It's still out there. We have to be very careful. Take care. Good night, everybody.